Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your patience. We're about to start.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this Friday Fireside. My name is Nason. I'm the host of these monthly Friday Firesides. These Firesides are a spiritual discussion forum that we host for friends, colleagues, neighbors, family to reflect and discuss on issues that affect our everyday lives and our societies. They started off at my place here in Johannesburg with about 10, 20 friends. But since the pandemic, obviously, we have gone online, and that has blurred all the geographic boundaries. So from a group of 20 friends, now we are over 100 people that join us not only from all over South Africa, but all over Africa and all over the world. And today's meeting is another testimony of that. So the format of these firesides, for those who are new and are coming here for the first time, is that we normally invite a friend or an expert to really introduce a topic. But it's not a one-way talk. It's not a work webinar that many of us maybe are used to. It's really a group conversation, an exploration. So we encourage everyone to share their views, their questions, and to be really as participatory as possible. I would like to just introduce some of my colleagues who are organizing this and will help me facilitate. So there's Tandiwe Burgess and Tinashe Shamu, which they can turn their cameras on. They will be helping with technical aspects and the meeting management. The usual ground rules apply. So if you're not talking, stay on mute. And then if you want to talk, raise your hand either virtually or physically so we can see. And you can use the chat box also as a function to express your comments. So even though we are large numbers, we want to keep the discussion very informal. So we really want to stay intimate, even though we are virtual. And so maybe as a start, we don't have time to introduce everybody, but maybe everybody can introduce themselves in the chat box and say maybe where they're from, their profession, their interests, something about them. And if you are, by the way, another housekeeping, if you have logged in with your device, Apple or Galaxy, please change it to your actual name so we know who you are and we can call on you. So just to also help us in keeping the meeting participatory, we use a lot of polls. So just to warm people up to the poll, we're going to launch the first poll just to know how everybody's feeling. So everybody can respond to the poll that I'm putting up. And while you respond to the poll, you can also write in the chat box who you are and where you're logging in from. All right, so I'm just going to share the results of the poll so you all understand how it works. So we can see that I'm glad most people are feeling good. Some people are feeling awesome, and just a small group of us are not feeling too well. That's great. I'm going to launch another poll just to get a sense of where everybody is joining us, to know where all the participants are from. So if you can tell us where you're joining us. Luvuyo, if you could share the polls, as I lost the controls, the result of where people are from. Great. So we can see that still a lot of us are from Gauteng province, from Joburg, Pretoria, and surrounding. I'm really impressed that we have a huge amount of people from other parts of the world. I know we have people joining us from South America, from Asia, from Europe. And in the chat, you can see from the different places people are joining us. So last year, as you know, most of us, were under a very hard lockdown, and we all ended up having all of our social life on Zoom, and we are a bit Zoom fatigued, all of us. So in 2021, we are hoping with the rollout of the vaccine, we'll somehow slowly go back to normal life and go back to physical firesides at our homes. So this year, what we decided to do is a hybrid, where we will still continue the virtual firesides for the ones who want to connect virtually, but also allow physical firesides on the weekend for people who want to get together in a more intimate and continue the discussions that we start. So for those of you who live in Gauteng province, there will be a physical fireside on Friday afternoon, facilitated by Tinashe, on Sunday afternoon. So if you're interested, you are welcome to contact me. I will put, Tandy can put my number on the chat. And to contact me if you want to join the Sunday fireside in Midrand. And there will be also another follow-up physical fireside in Durban for those of you who would like to continue the discussion and are from Durban or surrounding areas. And the contact person for that will be Haley, and we can also put Haley's phone number in the chat for anybody who wants to go to the Durban. So without much more to say on the logistics, I want to start to introduce the topic of tonight that we have all come to hear. So tonight's topic is much more spiritual than previous topics that we had, which were much more social and more economic. Tonight's topic will be exploring the mystical topic of life after death and what happens to the soul, what journey it has. So the reason why we chose this topic, the organizing team, is because with COVID-19, this pandemic has taken a lot of our loved ones. A lot of our loved ones has passed away. And obviously this has been difficult for many of us. So we thought it might be good to discuss life and death and purpose of all of this, so to appease our hearts. On a personal level, I have to say, in the last week, I have lost two dear, close family members, very close members of my community who have passed away. And I would like to personally dedicate this evening, this fireside, and remember these two souls during this fireside. One is my uncle, Dr. Masood Shaker, who was a civil engineer and a public servant in South Africa for the last 40 years. And in his last job, he was working for the Ministry of Health and was building all the hospitals, or overseeing the building of all the hospitals and clinics of the country. And tragically, he lost his life to COVID-19. So right in the field of trying to save lives. And the other is my Swazi mother, my Swazi mama, Dr. Sabina Silalula. Like many exemplary African women, raised alone 3 amazing children that many of us know, while getting a PhD and while serving her country, Eswatini, in the agricultural field and in community development. So I would like to dedicate this evening personally to these 2 close family members who passed away. But I'm sure all of you have loved ones, dear ones that you have lost recently and want to remember them as we continue the discussion. So I also invite you in the chat if you want to share some of your loved ones that you would like to remember and a bit more about them, so we can all think about them as we discuss the concept of life after death. We have some really amazing special guests tonight with us that will also share some insights on the topic. I'm not going to introduce them because they will be introduced by the facilitator and master of ceremony of tonight, which I'll now introduce. So the master of ceremony of tonight is my dear African-American Baha'i sister, Haley Fudu, if you can turn on your video so people can see you. She is the secretary of an interfaith group, Religions for Peace South Africa. She's also the founder of and CEO of Ubuntu Wellness Center in Durban. She's also academically has a master's in peace building and is also a very talented artist and musician. So I hope she can share with us some of her songs during the course of this fireside. So without further ado, let me hand over to Haley. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Nason, and welcome everyone again. I think Nason probably threw you all off a bit when he called me African American, but now you can see I am African and American by marriage. We also have our children with us, my son Dayon and our daughter Tandy. And because of, like Nason shared, the loss of many loved ones during the course of the last several months, over a year now of COVID, we thought it would be nice to sing for you a prayer for the departed that I love very much because it really has a beautiful, positive reflection on the journey of the soul and what is to come. So instead of grieving, we celebrate those who continue on this journey. So I've asked my family to sing along with us, and thank you again for those who are not very religious. Thank you for allowing us this 1 minute of prayer. Oh my Lord, oh thou forgiver of sins, bestower of gifts, dispeller of afflictions, verily I beseech thee to forgive the sins of such as have abandoned the physical garment and have ascended to the spiritual world, ascended to the spiritual world. Oh my God, purify them from trespasses, remove their sorrows, and change their darkness into light. Cause them to enter the garden of happiness. Cleanse them with the most pure water, and grant them to behold thy splendors on the loftiest mount. Thank you, friends. So that prayer ends by asking God to grant them to behold the splendors on the loftiest mount. So it's such a beautiful visual. We know that perhaps the next spiritual phase is not a physical space, but of course we relate things to the things we understand in this world. So friends, we're going to continue on now. And again, welcome to those who've just joined. There are two more polls that we'd like to ask you all to participate in before we get into our presentation and discussion. If I can ask my co-host to put the third poll up. Do you believe in life after this earthly existence? So we know we have a very large mix of friends with us today, of various belief systems or perhaps no belief system. So we'd like to just ask you all to just take a minute and just share what perspective you're coming from. So yes, you believe in life after this earthly existence. No, you don't, or you're not sure.
The results are showing, host is sharing poll results. There's no option to choose on my screen.
Okay, now I think it'll allow. Try now. There we go. Okay, there seems to be a lot of people who are saying yes, one no, and a few I'm not sure. Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing. And can everybody see the poll results themselves? Okay, great. So we're going to now launch the next one. Go ahead and put up the next one. What do you believe happens to us after we die? Nothing. That is the end of our existence. We reincarnate again on this earth as another human, animal, or vegetable being. We either go to the fires of hell or to the peace of heaven. We go to another spiritual world different from this earthly life. I have my own conception of the afterlife. I have no idea. I'm not sure. I'll just give it another 10 seconds for those who are finishing up. Okay, it looks like about 90% have voted. So here are the results. Looks about 71% have believed that we go to another spiritual world different from this earthly life, and 4 believe in some sort of a reincarnation, 3 believe in heaven or hell, and 12 have no idea, and 2 others have a different view. Okay, so there's some diversity of belief and thought there. Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and close that poll. So I'm just going to put up a few slides. If I can just ask you to bear with me, it's not a long presentation. I just did it was not exhaustive at all, but I decided just to take some time over the last couple of days to just look into the different kind of beliefs on this topic from various faiths. And I found some quite interesting things. This was the prayer we read earlier. And this I found from Psalms that is very similar also to something I found in the Baha'i writings that says, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." So even though some of us might not have a clear concept of what God is, I think we can all agree that it is a good thing in this life to try and clean our hearts and renew our spirits in preparation for whatever is to come. So this earthly existence is this opportunity really to purify ourselves. And I found this quote by Rumi, which I just thought was really appropriate. As you know, I am the Secretary of Religions for Peace South Africa, and we dedicate our time to creating spaces for dialogue and building understanding of various belief systems so that we can form relationships. And when we have relationships, we often can overcome any sort of difficulty. It's when we don't know each other and don't understand each other, we get into trouble. So Rumi says, all religions, all this singing, one song, the differences are just illusion and vanity. Sunlight looks a little different on this wall than it does on that wall, and a lot different on this other one, but it is still one light. So what I did is I took some time to look at a few quotations, and I was quite amazed at seeing some of the similarities across faiths. If I can ask maybe my son to read just this first one here.
I came forth from God and return unto him, detached from all save him, holding fast to his name, the merciful, the compassionate.
And that's from the Baha'i burial ring. And that's the message that Baha'is go out of this earth with. And Mali, this is from the Bible.
And the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it.
And from the Old Testament.
By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground. For out of it you will taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return.
So this concept of coming from dust and returning to dust, and then our spirit continuing on, is something that I saw not just in these two faiths, but in a few others as well. That was quite interesting. And then I found something in the Bhagavad Gita that reminded me of something in Corinthians. Maybe Tandy, can I ask you to read from Corinthians for me?
For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality.
Thank you. And there's another Tandy, Tandy Burgess, if you could read the other one for me.
I was about to read the last one. These bodies are perishable, but the dwellers in these bodies are eternal, indestructible and impenetrable.
Thank you. So these concepts of the immortality of the spirit goes across various faiths. And Tinashe, can I ask you to read the next one?
Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it.
Thank you, in the Talmud. So we know this life is about work, the work of purifying the spirit, which I just see this continual thread throughout all the faiths. And then just one last one from the Quran. Lavuyo, can I ask you to read this one? Or maybe Nason?
Sure. And this worldly life is not but diversion and amusement, and indeed the home of the hereafter, that is the eternal life, if only they knew. So, and Haley, I want to read out also, Jeff Broughton Markle has shared also something from Rumi, Jalal Rumi. So if you allow me to also read that quote. Whoever brought me here will have to take me home. That's from Rumi.
Lovely. Thank you for that, Jeff. And you know, this coming and going, I just wanted to share from my life experience in the work, in birth work. I've been with a lot of women as they've had their babies. And I've also had that sacred opportunity to be with people in during their last breaths. And the reverence in those moments of coming and going are really quite beautiful if the space is created to hold it with the respect it deserves. And what I experienced was very similar, this coming and going. And I also think it's interesting for us to conceptualize the idea that it doesn't have to be traumatic to welcome and to let go. Those are natural processes. And when we are allowing for that to happen, it's a lot less painful. I remember when my grandfather passed away, I had my mother read a letter to him, just telling him how proud I was of watching his spiritual journey from anger and frustration to acceptance and peace. And you know, he smiled and held her hand and just peacefully let go. My other grandfather, his whole life, he believed in nothing. And then my mom asked, do you mind if I say a little prayer for you in his last moments? And he smiled and held her hand, and she said a little prayer, and he squeezed her hand and smiled and went. So I just think it's interesting because we have all these journeys during this life, and in those last moments, we never know what a soul is going through, and there's no need to judge. There's just to hold everybody in love in those processes, and through prayer and whatever other way, through service in their name, there's many ways to honor each other's spirits and souls as they continue their journey. So the last thing I just wanted to share is this beautiful visual, this quotation from Baha'u'llah's grandson, Abdul Baha. He says, to consider that after the death of the body, the spirit perishes is like imagining that a bird in a cage will be destroyed if the cage is broken, though the bird has nothing to fear from the destruction of the cage. Our body is like the cage, and the spirit is like the bird. If the cage becomes broken, the bird will continue and exist. Its feelings will be even more powerful, its perceptions greater, and its happiness increased. So on that note, I just wanted to kind of leave that positive visual in your head as we continue on this journey together tonight. And just to remember that this evening is not about anybody trying to convince anybody else of a specific way, but it's for us to share various ways. And yeah, so I just think it's exciting to just explore this together. I see that our dear friend Justin has just arrived from the United States. Justin is a dear friend of mine that I haven't seen in ages. So I'm very excited to welcome him and to see his face again after so long. I understand he only has 30 minutes. So Mama Ila, can I ask if you don't mind if we change the order and have Justin go first? Is that okay with you, Mom?
Yes, sure.
Okay, thank you so much. So Justin, my dear, welcome, welcome, welcome. For those of you who don't know, Justin Baldoni is from the United States. He's a Hollywood actor and producer, and he also does incredible work with death and dying. And it's a topic he's quite passionate about. And so we've invited him here today to just share some of his thoughts on this topic. And yeah, I'd like to just hand over to you, my brother, sending you so much love.
Haley.
Hey, sweetie.
Oh, it's so good to see you and your kids and your husband. Oh my God, it's so wonderful. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
I knew your mom when she was very young. I was in college, and so it's so nice to meet you too, man. I'm so happy to be here. It's so cool. What a small but big world we have. And hi, everybody. Wow, there's 90 of you guys. It's so nice to see I can't really see all your faces, but I'm looking at some of your faces and it's very sweet all over the world. Thank you for having me. Hi, I think I see Zane is waving. Hi, Zane, how are you? Zane Bruce Watts. That big, beautiful beard. Look at that.
Yeah, howdy, Justin.
I'm sorry.
We're a couple of us here calling from Columbia, Missouri.
Oh, nice to meet you. So yeah, I just wanted to pop on and say hi. Haley asked to say a few words about the afterlife and life and death. I've never been there, so everything that I will say is from the Baha'i writings, and there are far more eloquent people than I to give lectures and talk about this. But I think in some ways, what maybe makes me a little unique is that I've dedicated a huge part of my career in entertainment to having these uncomfortable conversations around life and death. I about 10 years ago now had an idea to do this documentary series called My Last Days, which aired on our friends who are also Baha'is, the Soul Pancake, back in the Soul Pancake YouTube channel. It was one of the things that helped launch that channel and also my career. And I was just always so fascinated by specifically the Baha'i belief on what happens to us when we die. And I was always somebody who, growing up, it frustrated the heck out of my family because I would always ask questions. I loved asking questions that nobody would know the answer to. And I was never satisfied with the answers. I always wanted to go deeper. I didn't like I'm kind of a relentless seeker of truth. And I just hate that nobody has answers. And I don't like living in a world where there's so many unknowns. And yet we're so afraid to talk about certain things that we don't have answers to. So we make them taboo in some ways. And growing up, in many ways, I was always drawn towards people who were dying or who were older or getting closer to that, where so many young people that I knew were running away. So if I found out somebody in my family was sick or was getting closer to death, I would want to go visit them. I would want to go see them. There was something in me that was pulling me towards them, versus what happens in a lot of young people is we don't have the vocabulary because nobody's talked about it. And it makes us think about losing the people that we love. And so we run away from those people. So, like my grandparents, I remember videotaping them and asking them questions and wanting to get to know about their lives, always having the thought that, oh, this might be the last time I see them, because I would see them only once a year. And it made me curious. It made me think about, what am I doing with the time that I have? How am I spending time with them? What am I not learning from them? What could I learn from them? And then when I ask questions like, what happens when we die? Growing up, we're told there's heaven and hell, or there's this or that, and there's a place for some people and not for others. And that never just sat right with me, that we can just decide as if we know, based on extrapolating complex thousands of year old writings, what happens to us when we die. And so digging into the Baha'i writings was really helpful to me. And for anybody who is really deeply curious and wants to go deep, I would suggest there's a series of talks called Drawing Nigh to Baha'u'llah, From a Deep to Here's a Day, that take an hour at a time, 30 minutes at a time. There's nobody in the faith who speaks to this better than former House of Justice member, Mr. Tahirzadeh. But the writings gave me a logical, practical explanation that I was able to digest, that brought me a lot of answers that nobody else could. Now, that said, it doesn't, again, that's why I made the joke, I've never been there. But when you read the writings, and when you read the interpretation, and when you hear Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, say things like, for every spiritual law in the universe, there's a material counterpart, and vice versa. So when Baha'u'llah tells us we're all dummies, we're all like 3-year-old children who can't really understand, when he says, don't worry, let me make it simple for you. If you want to understand death, you have to look at birth. Okay, our minds can get that. We can start to go on that journey. There's a reason Abdul Baha says, who is the son of the prophet founder Baha'u'llah, that we spend a third of our lives dreaming, asleep. That's not an accident. Why would God create us this way? Well, if we're going to be born and know that one day we're going to die and one day we're not going to have our physical bodies, what a gift then God gave us to spend a third of our lives in the closest physical place we can be to death, which is deep sleep. Right? Scientifically, we know that our body cools down, our heart rate slows down, and for those few hours a night, we are transported somewhere without moving our bodies, and we're able to have a complete physical experience while in a state of paralysis. That's fascinating, but we don't talk about it. And oftentimes when we have these conversations, we don't marry the two things together. We don't think, oh, wait, there could be a world in which I could exist without my body. I go there every night. Literally. We know that if you hook us up to electrodes while we're sleeping, the electrodes measure the movement of our body. So in our minds, when we're dreaming and we're running, we know that that's happening because the muscles are firing, but they're not moving. So we're clearly going somewhere, right? It's like the near-death experience phenomenon. How many times have we heard scientists say that it's all because the brain is activated? It's all because when somebody dies clinically, when their heart stops, or when when they're brain dead, there's a part of the brain that's activated, which is how it can explain these mystical phenomenons, until you have somebody like Dr. Ibram Alexander, who was one of those doctors and scientists, those neurosurgeons who always believed that the part of the brain that's firing, that's explaining near-death experiences, which disproves all of these people that have it, until this doctor himself had a near-death experience, and the one part of his brain that was supposed to explain it was the one part of his brain that was not active. And so then what do? What do you say? What's the argument? How could you go and have a near-death experience when the one part of your brain you've built your whole career talking about being active is not active? There's got to be something more. So when you go back, when science reaches its end, because as we know, science is also a belief. And if you're not believing in God and trying to prove God, you're not going to be elevating science the way it should be elevated. And oftentimes science is trying to disprove something, right? How we know biases and research in science. So when you go back to Baha'u'llah and he tells you, or Abdul Baha, and we have these writings from our faith that tell us it's really not that difficult to understand. Just, we're logical human beings. Let's just think back to how you were raised, to how you were born into this world. Let's think about the dream state. You can start to understand it and digest it, because he also says that there will never be a way for us to understand the next life, to understand where we're going. Because why in the hell would we want to stay here if we could? And he gives us the analogy of the womb, which has really been the thing that has brought me the most comfort and has helped me the most in understanding. And when you start to really think about this life and the way that Baha'u'llah talks about the womb, it helps you really create a framework for understanding what the purpose of our lives actually is. And so for anybody on this Zoom who doesn't know the basic belief, I'll summarize it. Shortly. And again, I would suggest going and listening to Dr. Tahir Sadeh. But we're told to look at birth for a specific reason. Specifically, we're supposed to meditate and think about the womb of the mother, which we call the matrix, right? Not the Matrix, the movie, although a very similar idea, but the matrix of the womb. And that as fetuses, we have all that we need. We're growing, we're developing, we have this perfect world. The womb is like the Hawaii. It's the perfect temperature. It's always 75 degrees. You got all that you need. You're comfortable, you're floating, you got no worries. You're developing all of these things. You have no free will to develop these things. You're developing your arms and your legs and your eyes and your ears. You're developing your brain, because it's going to need to process all of these things. Your skin, right? You're going to need your eyes to process the photons that exist, but there's no photons where you are. You're going to need your ears to hear. In fact, it's very interesting that hearing becomes developed in the womb. You don't need it in the womb, but what's interesting is you can hear outside of the womb, and we have that. We know that scientifically, that the baby upon birth can understand and hear and knows the language of the mother. So you're developing all these things without your own free will. And you're coexisting, not just in your beautiful womb world, which is all you know, but in another world that's only 2 inches away. Now, of course, while you're in this womb world, you have no frame of reference to understand the infiniteness of what's waiting for you, of this other world. You can't. All you know is what you know. All you know is this womb world and the sounds that are coming through. You're not even aware that you're developing these things. But all the while, a thin sheath of skin is all that's separating you from this magical, wondrous existence, where you will suddenly need all of the things that you've been developing that you didn't even know you were developing. But again, if you were to go into the womb and tell the baby this, the baby would say, "What are you talking about? Are you crazy? No, that doesn't exist." Right? There's a funny meme I saw of 2 babies sitting in a womb, twins. One asks the other, "Do you believe in life after mom?" And when you think about that, you go, oh, wait a second, we're babies. Because what Baha'u'llah tells us is that one day we will die of the womb in an uncomfortable process, in a painful process. And we'll go through a tunnel, the birth canal, a very dark tunnel. And strangely, at the end of that tunnel is light. And you come out of the birth canal and you are greeted by the very people who knew you were there the whole time, who had hopefully been praying for you and loving you and nourishing you and assisting you, and who have been waiting for you and who are welcoming you with tearful eyes and open hearts into this new life that has been here the entire time. You just didn't know. Those people who are waiting for you went through the same process. They were also in the womb at one point. And now here they are. And suddenly, after this painful process, you need all of the things that you had been, unbeknownst to you, developing. We need them all. If you don't have these faculties, you're handicapped in this life. If you didn't develop eyes, you can't process light. If you didn't develop a nose, you can't smell the fragrances of the roses that were here the whole time. Or legs to walk, ears to hear. But you need them all. You had no use for them in the womb. We need them here. Baha'u'llah also tells us and reminds us that just like those of us who are waiting for the baby can play music for the baby in the womb, can talk to the baby in the womb, and we can actually develop and influence a child's brain while in the womb based on the kind of music that we play. The same thing happens in the next world, because when we're here, we're told we are in this new womb world. And Baha'u'llah says that the next spiritual world, when we physically die of this world, it's as different as this world is to the womb. How can we, as finite beings, comprehend the infinite? We're not able to comprehend a God. That's why God sends his messengers, right? We're not able to get close to the sun. That's why the sun sends its rays. We would burn up if we were closer to the sun. We can't even go, up into our atmosphere without protective coating. And we're still far from the sun. So the sun sends its rays. So we can't process the infinite because we have finite minds and we have finite brains. I mean, the more you think about this, the more you start to wonder, well, what is the purpose of the brain? Why do we have a brain? We can only use 10% of it. Well, what's happening with the other 90%? I've asked that question. Why can't we only use 10% of our brains? There's not and we know the brain can do phenomenal things. Look what happens when we see individuals who have a gift. They have a superpower. What's their superpower? Well, they activate a part of their brain that we can't activate. They take people in that have the ability to read minds or to communicate with folks who haven't passed, and they do scans of their brains and other parts of their brains light up that our parts don't. You wonder, why can't we use 90% of our brain? This is not in the Baha'i writings, so this, again, don't quote me on this, but my personal belief is that the brain is the very thing that prevents us from being able to fully see into the next world, to be able to understand it. It's on purpose, I believe, because Baha'u'llah tells us that the next world where we're going is as close to us as this world was when we were in the womb, which means that it's 2 inches away. It's here, it's coexisting. We just can't see it. We're told that it's closer to us than our own life vein. So when you hear these things, you wonder, okay, if we're in this womb, and Baha'u'llah tells us that we are in the matrix, we are here. We're here. We know we're here for a finite amount of time. That's not a secret. What scares us and why we don't talk about it is because we don't know where we're going next. And we've put so much attachment on the things of this world. But if we departed from that for a second and we allowed ourselves to dream and to think about this quote and this idea from the Baha'i faith and from Baha'u'llah, and to imagine what if we were in the womb, we have to ask ourselves, then what are the arms and legs and ears and eyes and brain cells that we're developing here? And if you flip that and you think about Baha'u'llah telling us that for every physical law in the universe is a spiritual counterpart, you can then see, well, the limbs and organs that are growing, that we're growing, are the spiritual attributes and the things we can't see that we can't take with us where we're going next. The difference is that in this life, God gave us free will. We have a choice, and that's the kicker. We have a choice to develop all of these things. The challenge and the problem is that the development of each of these qualities, these attributes, our spiritual organs and limbs, require the uncomfortable process of spiritual growth. In the womb, we develop them on our own. Here, we have to make a choice. And those choices are always met with resistance and detachment. Those choices force us into discomfort because we know scientifically that for anything to grow in this life, there's some form of friction that has to happen. Some form of discomfort. The cell splits, right? Growing pain. So as all of these things, as we start to, oh, somebody, hi, thank you. As we start to process all of these things, and you ask yourself, okay, so if I'm in the matrix, if I'm in this womb, I would want to grow my spiritual arms and legs and eyes and ears because I don't need them here. I mean, sure, it helps to have them here. If you think about it, generally, people that have developed a lot of these types of qualities on this plane of existence, the earth, are people that we like to be around. There's some sort of benefit that can happen when we choose to develop these things. We tend to follow the people that develop these things faster than others. There are spiritual teachers and our spiritual gurus, right? They're the prophets of God. The people that choose to develop these things in this life, we're drawn and attracted to, but that's not where we need them. We need them where we're going next. And what we know is we don't take our physical bodies with us. So if we can only take our attributes, our spiritual arms and legs and eyes and ears, and we know that world exists here, then it makes us have to question how we are living our lives. What are we doing with the time that we have? How are we spending our time? What are the choices that we're making that every day will ask us to grow those things?
That's a good question to leave us with, is those spiritual attributes. What is it that we want to develop for our soul? And like you said, that's what we take with us, right? From this womb is our soul, our spirit. So that's a really exciting thing for us to all think about. Justin, is there any last thing you'd like to share before we move on?
I had 4 or 5 more minutes, so if there was a question, I'd be happy to answer one. But I think we got the gist of it. And to know more, please follow and look at Tahir's Today and some of these deep teachings. These are just my interpretations. As you know, in the Baha'i writings, there are no gurus or pastors or preachers or anybody who has more knowledge than anybody else, or who has a platform to stand on and say, this is the way. We all have the chance to go and look up the actual root cause of the teachings and interpret them in our own way. So
I'm glad you said that, because I think with that humility of us all knowing that we all can learn something else from someone else rather than any of us really knowing all the answers, when we maintain that humble posture of learning, the growth never stops. So thanks for that. My daughter I have a question. And then if there's time for one more, maybe I'll ask Tinashe or the other Tandi to let us know. Tandi, go ahead.
As a child, when you were very crazy, wondering about death, did you ever fear it, or were you always ready to embrace it when the time came?
Oh, I still fear it.
Yeah.
And that's the difference, is I think that it's important to honor that in every person. So every person has their own journey with it. Part of what's driven me in my longing and my quest to go deeper, part of why I've spent the last 10 years bedside and with people who are getting ready to transition from this life to the next, is to help my own fear. Now, what I've learned for myself, though, is that my fear comes from my attachments. It comes from my love. It comes from my love of my family and my love of my children and my love of this world. And it comes from a lot of those things. And in my life, my process is going to be slowly praying for detachment and shedding those things, because at some point, I'm going to be forced to detach, which is why when Baha'u'llah or Abdul Baha was asked, how should one look forward to death? Abdul Baha laughed and said, one should look forward to death like the beginning of any journey, with excitement and with wonder. But you can only do that if you prepare for a trip, right? If you don't prepare for a trip, if you don't prepare for a journey, it can sometimes induce anxiety because you're not ready. You're like, oh my God, I got to pack. I got to pack. You could be going, I could show up at your house today and say, guess what? We're going to the place you've always wanted to go to, but you got to leave now. And that excitement for the place that you've always wanted to go to will be masked with anxiety that you're not prepared to go with your toothbrush or your underwear or your socks or your shoes, or maybe it's Antarctica and you only have shorts, right? So, but if you prepared for the trip and I showed up at your door and you had your bag packed, you'd be like, Justin, let's go. I've been waiting for this my whole life. And that's the difference. So when Abdul Baha says that, it means we have to be thoughtful in this life about the next, which is why we're told to ponder and to meditate on our mortality. So I still am packing my bag, if you will. And that's part of the process of what helps me.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Justin. So there are two more. There are two hands up. I don't know if we have time. There's Ilya.
Yeah, I have 8 minutes. I just don't want to enter. I don't want to push you guys too far, and then your next speaker isn't able to give her full speech.
Okay, sure. So I think Ilya can go ahead.
Thanks very much, and thank you, Justin, for sharing this amazing story. I'm a Baha'i too, and I share the same belief as you do, and it's been incredibly comforting for me in a non-Baha'i family setting, environment in Geneva, Switzerland, and all the other parts of the world I live in. But it's been such a huge comfort whenever I witness people pass away, including my grandfather and other people. However, we are around people, and I'm sure you've met hundreds, maybe thousands of people through your show, My Last Days, where you wanted, I'm sure, to comfort them as well, to see them comforted as you are comforted by those beliefs. But those people do not necessarily share those beliefs, or maybe they are very strongly, they have a very strong belief that there's nothing. So I've always been wondering, what should I say then? What can I offer as comfort, apart from a tap on the shoulder? Thank you.
Look, thank you, man. Thank you for saying that. I'm somebody who, for as long as I can remember, I shout these ideas from the mountaintops. I'll give you an example. I had the great pleasure of, I just wrote a book that just came out in America a few weeks ago about masculinity called Man Enough. And I was co-hosting a very large talk show in America called The Talk. It's on CBS. And I filled in for 2 weeks to kind of promote the book and do this whole thing. And one of the co-hosts is very well known because her husband died of COVID, and he was an actor, and the whole country was kind of praying for him and rooting for him. His name was Nick, and this woman's name is Amanda Klutz. So Nick was a Broadway actor, and he was basically in a coma for months and months and months. And we were all, everybody was kind of gathered around and galvanized to help him, hopefully he would wake up. And I had, over the course of my life, any chance I get, I always share these thoughts of what Baha'u'llah says. So anytime somebody is about to pass, or somebody's sick or has cancer, I'll oftentimes share these ideas with family members or my friends who are grieving or something like that. And one day I was told a few months ago that a friend of mine who I had given these words to for their own family member was good friends with this Amanda Klutz, whose husband Nick had passed away, and who the spotlight was on, because this was like one of the faces of COVID in America. And she had shared the Baha'i belief with her. And then Amanda went to her large Instagram following and shared what my friend had shared with her about the next life and how maybe this is the womb. Now, of course, she didn't know that it was from the Baha'i writings. She knew it was from me, but she shared this and she shared it with her followers, and thousands of people were touched by these words because they needed to hear them, because everybody was, as this conversation was dealing with COVID and so many people passing away, and we were bombarded with the deaths, and deaths just became numbers. They weren't even people anymore. It was the numbers of people. And Amanda shared this. She said, I heard this from my friend. She shared it with all her followers, and it gave them so much hope. Then here we are now, 2 months later, 3 months later, and her and I are sitting on national TV together, hosting this show. And I let her know earlier in the day that I was the person that shared that with the friend. And Amanda said, oh my God, we got to talk about it. So it became a whole segment on this national talk show where I got to explain to her that these words that I shared with our mutual friend Ashley were from Baha'u'llah. And we re-explained the entire thing to the country. And that can only happen if we're not timid about offering these words of wisdom. Because it's in our timidness and our not wanting to overstep that we sometimes deprive other people of these words from God that can give them extreme comfort and be a balm to their aching and grieving hearts. And there's actually, and you're welcome to, I posted that on my Instagram. There's a clip if you want to watch it. It's a pretty cool moment. And now we're talking about doing a children's book together about this very same idea. And that's how it happens. And what I told her on the show was that it's my belief that the reason I'm here on the show is because your husband, Nick, wanted this to happen. He's the one that guided us to this. He guided me to be on the show with you. And that's how this world and the next world circumambulate each other.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Tinashe, was there one other question before we wrap it up and come to the next segment?
There was Dan who had his hand up.
Hey, hi, fantastic talk. Thank you very much, Justin. I never had a chance to say goodbye to my grandfather. So this was when I was a child. And I felt about that time, I felt like I was going to sleep one night and I felt like a touch on my head. And that freaked me out for a long time. And I never spoke to anyone about it. But this is something that I'm fascinated with, this subject. And I've spoken to people about it now. And like you say, it's one of those subjects that we should talk about because it's fascinating and it's what life is, really. It's what everything is all about. But just wondering what your thoughts on the impact or the crossover from beyond, maybe, or what effect other things can have on us as we are here, or if you've experienced anything like that yourself.
That's a great question. Again, I want to say that I always encourage people to go back to the writings. Unfortunately, we didn't get a lot of that. We didn't get a lot of people asking that question to Abdu'l-Baha or Baha'u'llah, which I'm like, come on, guys. What else could you want to know? Like, ask those questions. But we have what we have. There are some pilgrim notes where somebody asks Abdu'l-Baha about ghosts. And there's one section where he just basically tells somebody, and this is where it's tricky. There's one talk where he just tells somebody that's a figment of your imagination. There's another talk where he tells somebody that, yeah, what you saw was real. Those are lost souls. So my extrapolation of all of this is kind of like how Jesus told his followers, I have much to tell you, ye cannot bear it now, right? Hence Muhammad and then Baha'u'llah would come. I really feel like the reason we're told to not really if we have a psychic ability to not like go down that path, is because we're not supposed to know. I think a lot of it is for our protection. I think there's a lot of protection in the fact that, like, you know, if the baby in the womb had consciousness and knew what was waiting for it, why the heck would it wait 9.5 months to come here? It'd be like, get me out. I want to sunbathe. I want to breathe that air. Like, I want to taste something. You would not want to be in the dark, constricted pit of the womb, right? Why would we want to be bound by our physical bodies, right? I hurt my back yesterday. This sucks. If I could experience freedom and my soul could, and if I could literally be infinite and go wherever I wanted to go with just a thought and be in all places at once and know all, like, why would I want to be stuck in this body? And I think there's protection in all of these things. So I don't know the answer to that, but what I can tell you is there are millions of people that have had experiences just like you, myself included, that are unexplained phenomena. And what I know is that the world, like the womb and this world, if we're told to look at the womb world and look at this world, we know that when my daughter, before she was born, I was able to kind of hold her hand if I knew where her hand was in the womb. I could put my finger up to hers and I could touch her. I could make her move. I could push her a little bit and she could move. To her, she might feel that and have no clue what that is. So if just based on what Baha'u'llah tells us, why couldn't your grandfather do that for you? And that's where we have to stop with it, because the rest of it is a hypothesis rooted in nothing except our imaginations, which can also play tricks on us. But if I can do it for my daughter in the womb, and I'm told from Baha'u'llah that this world is a womb, then there is a version where they can do that physically for me. We also know that they can only influence us in a positive way. We know that from the writings, right? Tahirzadeh talks about this. We know that they can only influence us in a positive way and that their prayers are stronger there than they are here. So they can pray for us and influence us and whisper in our ears and open doors for us in those ways. Give us idea, like there's things we don't understand about it. When it's my first question when I get there one day is, okay, that thing that happened, was that you? Who was that? I know that was one of you who gave me, which one of you gave me that idea? What about, like, these are the questions that I have. So I would just say to be open to it. And there's a reason why every psychic and every person has a different view of that world, because it's radio frequency. You could put on an AM radio and listen to a song and hear one piece of the song and move to a different spot and hear another piece of the song. And there's a reason we're not supposed to hear the whole song. It's not in our benefit to be focused on there, because Baha'u'llah has asked us to focus on here. The work is for us here. It's not for us there yet. We'll have our own work when we get there. We have plenty of work to do and detachments to do here.
That's it.
Thanks a lot, Justin. There's one more question if you do have time. I think.
Okay, I can do one more real quick. Yeah.
One more. Okay, so Zoe, it'll have to be real quick before we move on.
Hi, Justin. Zoe here from Barcelona. About channeling, you've researched a little bit about channeling, or I don't know if you have anything to say on that.
I know a little bit about channeling. Did you have a specific question about it?
Well, I channel. I'm reading William Stead at the moment, channeling from the other side and explaining what happens on the other side. Just what you're talking about, I'm kind of thinking the womb is like a transition place. No, we come from energy, we come into the creation space, which is perhaps the womb, and then we have this experience, this movie that we live. And then I imagine that there's like a transition on the other side before we return to energy. And then if we return again, if we reincarnate. But it was to be curious if you knew anything about channeling. And then also in this book, he mentions that it's our thoughts that are the important thing for the next, like not what we do, but what we think.
Interesting. Look, I think that there's a couple things, and I want to just bring it back to the AM radio frequency.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very enlightened spiritual people that have walked the face of the earth that have parts of their brains that work different than others. And the only place I'm willing to get 100% of my information is from who I believe are the prophets, the manifestations of God, because they come with a larger purpose, and that larger purpose is unity. And so when that ray of sun that emanates from the sun hits me, I know it feels different than if I go into a tanning bed and have ultraviolet light hit me, right? It might do the same skin to my melanin production, the same thing to my melanin production, but it's not the same light. And so all of the people that have existed in the world have their own version of that AM frequency. And so when I want to go deeper into these questions, I go to the faith. And Abdu'l-Baha tells us that there's no reincarnation. And he tells us, and he makes a joke about it. And he says, why would any just and loving God want to send us back to this God-forsaken, terrible place? Why would a just and loving God send us back to suffer twice? This is our chance. Also, we have to think about it as you get one. You're in the womb once. If we're told to look at birth, we don't get to go back to the womb more than once. So when we don't develop what we needed to develop in the womb, you don't get to go back. You're here. And that becomes your challenge or your opportunity. You're born with one leg, you'll learn how to walk with one leg, right? You're born the way you're born, you got to figure it out. So you got the one chance. And what I would say is that a book, you could line up 1,000 books, and everybody will have their own interpretation of what the afterlife looks like. Even people that have been there and come back, like Dr. Ibram Alexander, which I would recommend everybody read his book. I went through his book and I found it fascinating because he was a neurosurgeon and a neuroscientist. And I underlined almost indirect quotes that he said in his book that I found in the Baha'i writings. That's one of the few books that I can validate. Actually, the Baha'i writings support a lot of what he talks about. Now, again, remember, your brain also has bias. All of our brains have our own trauma, our own pain, our own everything on them. So we'll never purely be able to understand, even if we were able to go there and come back, what that world looks like without putting our stuff on it, which is why the only place I really go to are the writings. That's also why we're told to not develop those things or to try to see there, because you'll see only what you're able to see and you'll get a tiny picture of it, right? And it's if my Wi-Fi signal was going out, you might be able to see, you hear me, but you see that cloud. You don't have a full picture of where I am, but you think you do. And then you write a book about it. And then everybody takes that as gospel. And we start to think, oh, well, the afterlife is that cloud. When in reality, what if I'm in the afterlife and it's all of this thing? So there's no way to really know. But what I can tell you is that there's lots of great stuff in the writings. I think channeling is the same way. Who knows? Yes, maybe so, maybe not. But again, are we getting just a portion of it or are we not? And that's where the writing comes in. That's where the framework of the Baha'i writings that tell us, like, it's not for you to go there. Baha'u'llah basically is like, it's not for you. Don't go there. Go here, because when you are here, then you're taking the time to develop all you need for when you're going to go there. If you spend your time there while you're here, you're going to be handicapped. You're going to be born without eyes and legs and arms and ears. And you're going to have to figure out how to move around that world like that. That's why he wants us to focus on developing here and not to focus on there. It's supposed to be a comfort versus an occupation and where our mind should be. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Justin.
All right, everybody. It's been so lovely to be with you all. This is my favorite thing to talk about. And as you know, I could talk about it forever. And I so appreciate it. And I'm sending you all tons of love. And Haley, it was so nice to see you again and meet your wonderful family. And alawapa to all of you. And again, this is just an interpretation. So I could be totally wrong as well. Alawapa, everybody.
Take care.
Alawapa.
Thank you so much, Justin.
Bye.
So with those thoughts in mind about choice, about deciding how we want to spend this earthly life, developing our spiritual arms and legs. Lots of food for thought there. Thank you. Our next special guest is my adopted mother, Mama Ila Gandhi. She's the she's the granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi. And she has dedicated her life to human rights work and the development of peaceful societies. And also she is a co-president of Religions for Peace International. And she has worked tirelessly for years trying to help people of various faiths come together in unity and explore, like Justin says, this is just my interpretation, explore our beliefs together as a human family. So I'd like to now hand it over to my mother, Mama Ila, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Haley, and thank you to Justin for that beautiful presentation. I think there's a lot of synergy between what Justin has said and what I'm about to say. I follow the Gandhian tradition and will speak from that perspective. Gandhiji studied a number of scriptures of many religions, and he said that this respectful and dedicated study enabled him to better understand his own religion, which was Hinduism. He was able to study scriptures intellectually rather than emotionally, and take from them what he felt was the most appropriate and relevant to his personal belief. Bhikkhu Parekh, who has written extensively about Gandhiji, said that Gandhiji believed, and I quote him, every major religion contributed a special vision of God. Christianity emphasized God as a loving father. Islam stresses monotheism and equality, and Hinduism emphasizes the principle of unity of life and the doctrine of ahimsa. All of them incorporated a truth, and together they form a powerful philosophy. He accepted the Hindu belief that all souls will attain the highest spiritual summit at one time or another. This may take many, many births before it is attained. And I want to say that we need to look at what is the idea of birth. Is it just the one where you leave the womb and are born? Or is it we are being born every other day as we gain new knowledge, as we begin to see the world differently? Is that not also a birth? So it could be many births in this lifetime, or it could be different births. A devotee has to personally experience the eternal truth within himself or herself until he or she finally reaches the pinnacle of consciousness where man and God are forever one. This is referred to as moksha or nirvana or other names that people have given according to their beliefs. He believed further that the universe undergoes endless cycle of creation, preservation, and dissolution. This is an eternal cycle of life, or in the case of human beings, of the body. We are born, we live for a period, and then we die. This cycle of life and death is experienced by the body, which is a vehicle for the soul. The soul does not die. It moves from one vehicle to the next and eventually reaches destination. So yes, this is the belief of birth, after many births. He believed in karma, or the law of cause and effect, by which each individual creates his own destiny through his or her thoughts, words, and deeds. He believed that the soul resides in all life in the universe. We each have a soul within us. It can lie dormant, or we can awaken it and become conscious of it through a number of practices. When we are able to awaken the soul within us, it will guide us and guide every act that we perform. He believed the soul reincarnates, evolving through many births until all karmas have been resolved and moksha, or liberation from the cycle of rebirth, is attained. The Gita, on which his philosophy was developed, says, and I quote, "Freed from pride and delusion, having conquered attachment, dwelling ever within the self, all desires gone and liberated from contraries, such as pleasure and pain, he of pure vision goes to the abode of eternity." So similarly, as Justin spoke about attachment, this is also about attachment. He was also influenced by the writings of Tolstoy, in particularly the book, "The Kingdom of God is Within You." And Tolstoy writes, and I quote, that this social order, with its pauperism, famines, prisons, gallows, armies, and wars, is necessary to society. That still greater disaster would ensue if this organization were destroyed. All this is said only by those who profit by this organization, while those who suffer from it, and they are 10 times as numerous as those who benefit from it, think and say quite the contrary. So he believed in non-violence and condemned war as being against our faiths. Gandhiji took further this belief through his non-violent struggle against injustice and oppression. While believing in non-violent action, he also constantly spoke of the inner voice. Listen to it and it will guide you. That's what he said. Gandhiji particularly chose chapter 12 of the Gita as the most important. In this chapter, we learn about the art of devotion, through which we are able to connect with the soul within us. The Gita explains the various yogas which help us in the direction of the journey within ourselves. He particularly emphasized the importance of the 4 yogas, which are most important. The first one is Bhakti Yoga, or the power of prayer. The second is Jnana Yoga, or the power of knowledge. The third is Karma Yoga, or the power of service. And the fourth is Ashtanga or Hatha Yoga, the power of postures and breathing, or self-control of the body. Of these 4, Gandhiji emphasizes the importance of Karma Yoga, or service to humanity, and care of the universe through personal work and commitment. While many speak of karma as being the evil deeds a person commits and for which she will be punished, Gandhiji emphasized karma as service to humanity and the universe as an essential feature of life. If work or service is performed with good intentions and without selfish motivations, then that service is regarded as service to God. All other offerings to God are not regarded as important as this dedicated service to humanity and the universe. This is what Gandhiji believed. But in addition to this, he emphasized some of the important values, among which the most important are renunciation, love, non-attachment, and prayer. He who meditates on God and does not desire anything has attained equanimity so that pain and pleasure are accepted equally as part of life. There are no cravings, and at the time of death, only the name of God on his or her lips. Such a one, he believed, will be united with God. But he stressed as he read the various scriptures that there are many truths and that all are of equal value, and people have to each find their own truth, their own answers. Gandhiji also stressed that in his way of thinking, karma yoga or duty and service were crucial, and therefore for him, leaving the world and living in an ashram was not necessarily the only way to attain God. Each person carries a responsibility, and it is important to fulfill that responsibility faithfully as he or she also observes the universal values and lives by them. He said, do your duty without wasting a single thought on the fruits of your action. For him, life and death were part of the same process, as Justin has explained. The distinction lies between the body and the soul. The soul never dies. The body passes through childhood, youth, adult, senior, elderly, and perishes. The body is born. The soul is birthless and unchanging. It ever was, is now, and will be there for all times to come. But the body perishes and dies. Encountering death, our grief arises from delusion. This is what he said, from our wants, from our own loss of a loved one. The departed one is at peace. The soul cannot be wounded by weapons or burned by fire. It cannot be dried by wind or drowned in water or buried in soil. So he advises to the bereaved ones, grieve not the departed one. Rejoice the love you shared. Cherish the memories you have. Study the footprints left behind by the departed soul and build on it. And that is how we can deal with death of other people. Now, how do we deal with our own death? And that is our own preparation. We, however, suffer and are never at peace if we constantly pursue sense objects and build attachments to them. He believes that from the attachment arises desire. When desire is thwarted, then we begin to get angry. Anger drives us to madness. He or she loses his or her memory and behaves in a disorderly manner. And longing are all ignoble end. Desire, anger, and longing are all ignoble ends. So attachments and anger, envy and longing are all emotions that affect a person's well-being. Such a person is never able to experience true happiness, as he or she is never contented or at peace. He wants that in action we see inaction, and we understand wrong action. Wrong actions are those inspired by desire, and those actions that cannot be performed in the absence of desire. Wrong actions are those that cannot be done in a spirit of detachment. Humility, earnestness, and service begin with faith and end in experience. We need to see all beings in ourselves and ourselves in all beings. Everything is thus informed by God. This wisdom is the highest attainment. It brings peace of mind and contentment. It must be practiced daily so that it becomes natural. He stressed the importance of self-control, complete devotion, and become absorbed work or action for others without any distinction such as gender, class, caste, religion, etc. So this to me is the journey of the soul. It moves within us and is as accessible as we allow it to be. If I suppress it, it lies dormant within me, and I am never at peace, and happiness eludes me. If I acknowledge its presence within me and let it guide me, I will always be able to find true happiness and peace in this world. So at the end, now in the Gita, Arjuna says to Krishna, and I quote, "Trouble and ignorance are gone. The light hath come unto me by thy favor, Lord. Now am I fixed. My doubt has fled away. According to thy word, so will I do." Gandhiji places that emphasis on do because by doing, we are able to serve our humanity, our world. And it's that service that will bring peace to us now and at the end of our lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share some of the gleanings of what you've shared at the very end. But now we have just a few, about 15 more minutes, and I just wanted to give this opportunity to those that have joined us to ask you any questions or share any comments on what you've shared. Over to you, Tinashe.
So currently there aren't any hands up, but feel free if there's anyone who wants to ask a question or share anything. I think this is the time.
You can also type your question. You can also type your... You go, Haley. It's fine.
Sorry, Tandy. I just wanted to ask everybody to please, if they do want to comment, to keep it nice and brief, maybe 1 or 2 minutes. And Tandy, you said that they can type their question as well?
Yeah, and I'll read it for them.
Okay.
Can I say anything?
Yes, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry that my video is off. I'm just I just got home not so long ago, so I'm actually listening to and actually viewing this from my car. I joined in a bit late, but however, I found that so enlightening. And thank you so much for the sharing. I wish I should have joined a bit earlier. I just had a few things to deal with, which is out of the integrity of me being there on time. But however, I want to acknowledge the little that I got, so empowering and so enlightening. And yeah, I'm a stand for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think it was the Tumeleng was speaking.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much for that. I was actually chatting offline with a lady called Rachel. I think she had a story that she also wanted to share. So Rachel, if you are still here, please feel free to do so. And then, yeah, we'll take it from there.
While we're waiting for Rachel, I just wanted to also say, and to Tumeleng, I'm glad you used the word. It's very enlightening because. Can
you hear me?
Hi, Rachel. This is actually my sister over in Hawaii. Rachel, over to you.
Can you see me? I'm just curious. I've never done this.
We can hear you.
We can see you and hear you.
So yes, my experience was, like Justin was saying, very there's like a lot of fear and anxiety around it. But when you actually accept all that happened, your psychic abilities, or I want to call them gifts, were enhanced in a lot of ways. So the experience was terrifying, yet when we go through kind of trauma or traumatic experiences, it can expand our mind. And if you choose to tap into the spirit world, which I tend to do, it's a really amazing experience and feeling to have. And I definitely want to tap into more of what my gifts are because of it. And yeah, it's pretty cool.
Sorry, Rachel, just to put you on the spot a bit. So when you mentioned an experience, did you have a near-death experience?
I definitely did. It was a traumatic experience. So I don't want to go into the detail in that, but to have come back, I feel like I came back with a lot more knowledge on the other side. I want to say the other realm that is there, the other side of the physical being. So I don't know if that answers.
Thanks so much for sharing, Rachel. That's really nice to hear. We also have a hand from Dan. He wants to ask a question.
Hey, thank you so much for an amazing chat. One quick question that popped in my mind when Rachel was just speaking regarding trauma. Is trauma a catalyst for change? How do you believe this? Or a catalyst for growth? I was thinking. And is there something in trauma that can open up the doors to have different gifts or abilities, or just a different way of seeing things, maybe, if that makes sense as a question?
I believe it is. Throughout my lifetime, I've experienced some unfortunate events that have brought me to this point. So it definitely, I want to say, in a metaphor sense of a lobster under pressure is the only way that it grows. So under this pressure or traumatic experiences, I have definitely grown in my psychic ability, or just in my spiritual world, to grow to to attach to something in the physical world, but also be in that spiritual world.
Thank you, Rachel. I also wanted to ask Mama Ela, I know you've gone through some quite traumatic things in your life as well. And I'd like to ask you also to share your thoughts on that question.
Yeah, I think, every experience in life teaches you something new, and you begin to look at life in a different way. So, yes, I went through a number of different kinds of experiences. I lost my son. He was quite young, and that was a traumatic experience. But I learned how to forgive, even though because he was killed, he just didn't die of natural causes, he was killed. And how does one deal with that? To this day, I do have many, issues within me which I'm still battling to deal with, because I don't know who the person was. I don't know why that was done. So there are lots of questions, and they do trouble me sometimes. But then one begins to sort of philosophize that the soul isn't dead, that the body was killed, that the spirit is still alive. And those are the kinds of things that give you some comfort when you begin to think like that. But again, the whole idea of growth and learning is that you don't, you know it, you've read about it, but do you really believe it? Can you live with it? Can you put it into action in your thoughts, deeds, and words? And that is the learning process that we go through. So each traumatic experience and each hour or each moment of your life continues to teach you something new. And you begin to conquer something, and you find that there are other things you still need to conquer. And it goes on like that. Those are the realities of life. And that is where our scriptures help us so much. And that is what Gandhiji said, that each one's truth is built by yourself. Your own experiences build your own truth.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Also,
so
as
much.
you were
There's
saying that, thank you. I was also just thinking of relating that to one of the concepts Justin shared about in this world, we're developing our arms and legs for what's to come. And when you're saying that each traumatic experience helps us grow, it's almost like each test and difficulty is helping us, develop that eye or that ear or that limb. And so we need to embrace those painful and difficult tests because God loves us. He wants us to grow. If it was easy, we would stop growing. Tinashe?
Yeah, there's a very interesting quotation that someone has shared on the chat, and I'll just read it out. I thought it was speaking to what was just shared. And it says, failures, tests, and trials, if we use them correctly, can become the means of purifying our spirit, strengthening our characters, and enable us to rise to greater heights of service. So that's from a letter on the behalf of Shoghi Effendi, one of the central figures of the Baha'i faith.
Thank you, Tinashe. So that relates also to what Mama Ila was talking about, how our souls grow through devotion and through service. And then some of the other things you said about self-control, daily practice, and all of those types of things that are the different types of yoga as you described them, all of them help our soul on that eternal journey towards nirvana or enlightenment or moksha. And to me, it sounds like that is an eternal journey to get to that. It feels like the growing will never perhaps ever end, but we're on that journey, and that's the important part. And I think also just the idea of conquering our attachment and learning to detach, that came across in both the two talks. And I'm kind of wrapping up this night and the things I've learned. And I think that if we look at creating that pure vision of what we're trying to detach from, what we're trying to conquer, then we're all on that journey. Whatever belief system we have, we're on that journey together.
So we're about to wrap up in the next 10 minutes, and I see there's a hand from Mac. So Mac, if you can share what you want to share, please.
Thank you very much. I think it's a very interesting topic, and when I saw the invite from this, and I was quite excited to want to be part of it, just to see what other views others have. I have also had several experiences before. 3-4 years I wasn't into all of this. I lived life like just go to work, do what is needed, go home, until suddenly I had some experience that suddenly the whole life changed. I was a staff of Nathan, with Nathan for some time, and from that time, how I look now and all the things that I got to learn, and from the discussions today, just one thing just came in my mind is what Carl Jung once said, that most of us came here to the earth and kind of forgot why we arrived here on earth, and until it seems as if somewhere before we came, we kind of set reminders, and these reminders kind of could be traumatic events, could be circumstances, or could be something that just kind of kick us into gear to remind that, well, there's something more, so that we don't just get lost in the the ordinary life the way it is and forget. So to me, the most important of what I've heard today is more like, well, we've got all this information. How do we then use it to, or what methods do we use? How do we then use it to practice to get more out of the situation, to get closer? Because to me, one thing is, and how do we are we allowed to let or to alert others also to know, to start the finding? Because when I look at the world around me lately versus the world that I used to be in, and the people who are still on that path the way they used to be, I used to think, do we have that's why I like the talk of the guy from the US earlier, and of course, Ma'am also spoke about the methods of yoga and stuff, which I do currently. But the question is, how do we let other people, know that there is something, or do we let them also until they also face their own reminders or their own traumatic situations before they get onto the path?
Mom, would you like to try and answer that?
Okay. I think a lot depends on individual, how you feel, how you see the world, what is your priority, and so on. But when we look at it from the point of view of separating the spirit from the body, because the body and the senses ask you to do a lot of things. Those are the ones that, want things from the world. They don't give, they want. The body is asking for tasty food, maybe, to smell beautiful flowers. All your senses are asking you to do things for yourself, but not doing things for others. So when we look at how can we do things for others, then we are guided by the Spirit. And if we pay more attention to the Spirit and allow that Spirit to dictate our terms rather than the body, then we attain greater knowledge. You can then read a book and learn good things from the book. Talk to people and be able to sieve out the good from the bad. And we are always, throughout life, we are seeing two sides. There are certain things that are bad. We are looking at violence every day in our lives. We are looking at, all the different things that happen in the world. Now, how do we pick out the good from the world and, discard the bad? And that is the whole, being able to do that is the lesson that we have to learn in our lives. So each one has to learn that lesson, him or herself, through their own, the way they see the world, the kind of beliefs that they have, and so on. So every belief is powerful, and therefore every religion is powerful. We can't say that one religion is more superior than the other. They all powerful, they all guide us, and we are guided through our individual beliefs, through those beliefs. I hope that explains. I'm not sure. This is such a complex topic that it's difficult to just explain it.
Thank you.
So Haley, we have another hand up from Charlotte.
Welcome, Charlotte. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for all the wonderful contributions. I often have conversation with, different people with regards to death. And, often friends would say when they reach a certain age, whether they're 50, 60, they would say, oh my goodness, I need to begin to get my life affairs in order because I'm reaching now the age of 50, 60. And so it makes me think, it seems like there's this understanding with some friends that, you're going to leave this world when you reach a certain age more, after 50 or 60, right? And so I was just wondering, why do we think actually that we know that we're going to die later? And that was the one. And the second one is, untimely death. So often when some friends who's maybe younger, or even sometimes in early 50s, 40s pass, and you often hear friends say, such an untimely death, right? So my question is, what does that actually mean, Because for me, from what I've just heard that was shared, it's just, the simple truth really is that for us to truly understand death, we can't truly understand life, right? And so it seems like we almost have to sort of, realign our lives, in a way that it will help us, with some of the choices that we have to make when we truly understand, death in order to understand life. And so in a way, one can't really say that, death is untimely because it's not for us to know. I don't think anybody knows when we leave this world. I would imagine we can just try to prepare ourselves the best way we can. And of course, there's always this big question around when a child dies, God forbid, it's the most tragic thing. And I think in the Baha'i writings, it talks about this tragedy, of a child dying. So my question really is, untimely death, what is the thoughts around that? So sorry, I know it's towards the end of the talk, But that's something that I've always been fascinated about. And I'm just wondering if there's any thoughts with regards to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlotte. I'll hand it over to Ila if you'd like to share something. I just want to, one quotation from the Hidden Words came to mind about bringing ourselves to account each day before we are summoned to a reckoning, because death unheralded will come upon us and will be called to give account for our deeds and works in our days. So that quote stood out to me because, like Charlotte's saying, we don't know when this is going to happen. But if on a daily basis we are going through that reflection, it should perhaps help us be a little bit more prepared if the day is tomorrow. I just wanted to share that thought. Mama Ila?
Yeah, so, you know, the grief at the time of death, whether it's a child or whether it's adult or whoever it is, the grief that we feel, people who are left behind and who are experiencing another person's death, is felt because of the attachment. And if we can detach ourselves and say, as you know, I have quoted earlier, that the departed soul has gone to a beautiful place. Don't worry about that soul. You worry about what is here and now for yourself. And not in a selfish way, but in a way where you purify your own life. Because the way you purify your life is the way you attain happiness. And grief and happiness are part of your life. All kinds of grief, all kinds of, you know, feelings of good and feelings of not so good, you know, feelings are all part of this life here. And that happiness comes only from within you. It doesn't come from outside. When you begin to think that happiness comes from outside, then you lose the direction. You're going in the wrong direction. So therefore, the direction is inside yourself. That's the journey that we need to learn to take within yourself. Explore your own, daily explore your own, you know, soul within you. And feel, because at the end of the day, you feel happiness from all the good things you've done. And you gain happiness from the things that you have done because you've enjoyed it. But if everything you are doing is a toil and it's not something you are enjoying, and you feel your body is tired and you know you feel distracted from the soul inside, then you will be unhappy and you will never be able to achieve the kind of happiness that a person achieves just from going within. So this is an individual thing, and yeah, it's difficult to explain, but at each stage, and we continue to grow, and our, you know, religion teaches you. Each faith has its own way of dealing with that trauma that lies within you. But every faith talks about prayer, the power of prayer, and the power of prayer is taking you inside, because your prayer is inside you, it's not outside. You can say things and you're still not praying. You can sing things and you're still not praying. You can only pray when you go inside yourself, because that is the power of your prayer. I don't know if that is clear. But everything about life and death is very mysterious and mystical. And so it's very difficult to explain to somebody else. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So let us all go inside ourselves, like you've said, and just continue the journey. With that, I'd like to just thank you again, Mama Ila, for being with us and sharing your wisdom. And I'd like to now just turn over to Nason just to close it up for the evening and wish everybody a lovely night.
Yes. So I want to just take these last concluding words to wrap up the evening. Just to finish off the topic or the question that Charlotte raised, I thought there was a quote in the chat that Zoe shared from Mopshi Baba about untimely death, which the quote is, "Everybody dies right on time." So I think that's also...
I love that. Yes, that's great.
But I want to just say to everybody that this topic of life after death, as we have seen, runs throughout all religions. We have heard quotes from all different religious scriptures. And there are also courses that people can take to study and understand better this very mystical topic. And these courses are based on the writings that have been shared by Justin and by others. So if anybody is interested in joining any of these courses on life after death, in your area even or online, you can contact Tinashe, which is here in the group. He will put also his number, and he can put you in touch with one of the study groups that is studying a course on this subject, if anybody is interested to continue. But in the short term, I want to remind you all that if you live in Johannesburg, in Pretoria, in Ekurhuleni, or in Durban area, and want to continue this discussion in a more intimate and informal setting, you're welcome to come to the follow-up physical fireside that we are organizing in Midrand and in Durban on Sunday, this Sunday. So my number again, maybe Tinashe and Tandy can put for those who are interested to attend the Midrand physical fireside, and Haley's number for those who want to attend the Durban one. And with that, I want to thank everybody for this very inspiring evening and for the beautiful contributions that everybody has made. I want to thank the team which has put together this fireside. So Haley, Tandy, Tinashe, Rutendo, who did this beautiful poster that you all have been invited, and the speakers, of course, Mama Ella, thank you so much for for coming and joining us, Justin, Baldoni, and all of you as participants and your contributions and what you have shared. So with that, I want to wish everybody a good evening or a good morning wherever you are in the world, and stay safe and have a wonderful weekend. God bless you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
All right.
Thank you, Nathan. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.